In a residential neighborhood in the suburbs of San Diego, California, there stood a house with distinctive pale pink exterior walls. The 9 o'clock morning sun illuminated the bougainvillea in the garden, and the sound of a neighbor's lawnmower broke through the quiet morning air. From the kitchen came the sound of eggs frying and the gentle hiss of steam rising from the coffee maker. "Ryan, breakfast is ready," Emily Sanders called out to her 3-year-old son while supporting her large belly. She was just 1 week away from giving birth to her second child. Her hands, accustomed to working from home as a graphic designer, remained delicate and skilled even during pregnancy. However, this morning the pain in her lower back was stronger than usual, making her movements awkward. "Mommy, isn't the baby in your tummy coming out yet?" Ryan climbed onto his chair while looking worriedly at his mother's large belly. With his active and friendly personality, he was beloved by everyone in the neighborhood. Emily smiled as she gently stroked her son's head. "Very soon, sweetie. You're going to have a cute little sister. I'm gonna be a big brother." Ryan's innocent mispronunciation made Emily laugh heartily for the first time in a while. However, beneath that smile lurked anxiety. Her husband Michael was away on business in Seattle for an important project and would likely not be able to return before her due date. Her husband, who worked as a project manager at an IT company, was responsible and family-oriented. But this particular project was crucial to the company's future, and he couldn't easily step away from it. Therefore, Emily had come to stay at her childhood home while awaiting the birth. On the surface, it was to receive support from her mother, but the actual situation was very different from what she had imagined. "Emily, haven't you finished cleaning up breakfast yet?" Margaret came down the stairs. She had once worked as a nurse, but after her husband's death, she had lived as a homemaker. With her back straight and her gray hair severely pulled back, she appeared somewhat intimidating. "Good morning, Mom. I'm just about to clean up." Emily hurriedly began clearing the dishes, but her large belly hindered her movements, making them slow. Margaret clicked her tongue in displeasure. "You can't use being pregnant as an excuse to be lazy. When I was pregnant with you, I did housework normally right up until my due date. And look at your sister. I raised you both the same way, yet there's such a difference." From upstairs came a woman with a sleepy, disheveled face. Emily's sister Jessica had been living at home as a part-time worker since graduating from college. However, in their mother's eyes, she appeared as a free-spirited and charming daughter. "Good morning. Another perfect breakfast, as always." Jessica's words carried sarcasm. She had suffered for years from the reality that no matter what her sister did, she was praised, while she herself was criticized for everything. Although she had a cosmetology license, she couldn't maintain workplace relationships and had repeatedly changed jobs. "Jessica, you should help too," Margaret called to her younger daughter, but her tone was much gentler than when she spoke to Emily. "Well, since Big Sister wants to do everything herself, there's no place for me." Jessica picked up a coffee cup while glancing at Ryan. While she found her active and intelligent nephew cute, he also seemed like a symbol of her sister's perfect life, which made her feel conflicted. "Ryan, don't you have a good morning for Auntie?" "Good morning, Aunt Jessica." Ryan greeted her energetically, but he somehow sensed the heavy atmosphere among the adults. Despite being only 3, this sensitive child dimly understood that his mother was isolated within the family. Emily continued washing dishes in silence. In the 8 years since her marriage, she had only returned home a few times a year. The sense of alienation she felt each time had grown even stronger since becoming pregnant. Her mother had always favored her sister, but during this visit, she noticed that tendency had become even more pronounced. "Mommy, does your tummy hurt?" Ryan looked up at his mother with concern. Emily smiled at her son while placing her hand on her lower back. "I'm fine, sweetie. It's just a little heavy." However, inwardly, her anxiety was growing. She had hoped for support from her family while her husband was away, but the reality was harsh. Her mother told her not to be weak, and her sister gave her cold looks. Her only ally was her 3-year-old son. As Margaret headed toward the living room, she muttered, "Really, I raised you both the same way, yet you turned out so differently. Jessica is much more independent." Those words filled Emily's heart with deep disappointment. A mother who valued the sister living freely and carelessly at home more than her daughter who was about to give birth. The remaining week she had to spend in this house suddenly felt very long. Ryan saw his mother's expression and took her hand with his small one. "Mommy, I'm here, so it's okay." In that moment, Emily felt saved by her son's kindness. After finishing the breakfast cleanup, Emily sat down on the living room sofa. The mild abdominal pain she'd been experiencing since last night seemed to be getting a bit stronger this morning. Ryan spread his toys on the floor, making woo-woo sounds as he ran a small fire truck around. In contrast to this peaceful scene, Emily's heart was filled with anxiety. It might hurt a little. Emily whispered softly to herself while placing her hand on her belly. It could be false labor, but it was still a week before her due date. She told herself it would probably be fine. "Did you say something?" Margaret asked in an uninterested tone while reading the newspaper. She wore reading glasses and was intently studying the social pages of the local paper. Keeping track of neighborhood acquaintances' activities had become her daily routine since retirement. "My stomach hurts a little. But I'm sure it's fine." Emily answered in a light tone, trying not to worry her mother. However, Margaret's reaction was colder than expected. "How dramatic. In my day, even when labor pains started, we moved around normally. You always make a big fuss over the smallest things." Those words made Emily's chest tighten. She hadn't wanted to worry her mother about her condition. She just wanted to receive a little understanding. Jessica came downstairs and took orange juice from the refrigerator. With her bedhead hair carelessly tied back and wearing the same pajamas as yesterday, she snorted with laughter after hearing her sister's conversation. "Big sister always wants to be the center of attention, doesn't she? The perfect pregnant woman, the perfect mother, the perfect wife. But in the end, your husband isn't here when it matters most." Emily couldn't argue with that sarcasm. It was true that Michael wasn't here now. However, it was because he was fulfilling his work responsibilities and supporting his family. "Mommy, is the baby in your tummy okay?" Ryan looked up at his mother with concern. The pure care from her 3-year-old son warmed Emily's heart. She gently stroked her son's head. "I'm fine, sweetie. Mommy is strong." However, by afternoon, the pain had definitely gotten stronger. Emily began timing the intervals while watching the clock. Though irregular, the pain was clearly coming more frequently than in the morning. This might be false labor, or it might be the beginning of real labor. "Mom, I think I should call the hospital," Emily suggested tentatively. Margaret turned around with an irritated expression while watching a TV talk show. "Aunt Marion and cousin Sarah are coming for dinner tonight. It's a rare family gathering, and you need to help." "But the pain. Another fake illness?" Jessica interrupted with a mocking voice. She was painting her nails and didn't even look at her sister. "Big sister, you always have to be number one, don't you? Getting sick on the very day relatives are coming, isn't that too convenient to be a coincidence?" Emily bit her lip. Her sister's words were unfair and off-target, but she didn't have the energy to argue. The pain was coming in waves, making it difficult to concentrate on the conversation. "Ryan, put away your toys. We need to clean the house before your great-aunt and cousin arrive." Margaret gave instructions to her grandson while heading to the kitchen. She had to start preparing dinner. Aunt Marion had always been strict about cooking, and there was no room for shortcuts. "Mommy, does it hurt?" Ryan looked worriedly at his mother's face. Emily tried to smile to reassure her son, but the smile was strained. "Just a little, sweetie. It'll get better soon." However, by 5 o'clock in the evening, the pain was approaching the limit of what she could endure. While making salad in the kitchen, Emily repeatedly gripped the sink counter to bear the pain. Sweat appeared on her forehead, and her breathing became shallow. "Mom, it really hurts. This might be labor." Emily's voice was desperate, but Margaret didn't even turn around while putting meat in the oven. "The relatives will be here in 2 hours. Bear with it until then. Everyone is looking forward to seeing you, and going to the hospital would be rude. But the baby? You'll be fine. It's not your first child, so the baby won't come that quickly." Margaret's definitive tone filled Emily with despair. She knew her mother had medical knowledge from her nursing background, but that knowledge was now becoming a tool to torment her. Jessica appeared in the kitchen and cast a cold glance at her sister. She had just returned from a job interview at a hair salon that afternoon. However, she had once again been rejected for lacking cooperative spirit. Big sister's child will probably be spoiled rotten anyway. You can tell by looking at Ryan. He's so quiet, like a doll. Emily felt anger. She couldn't tolerate criticism of her son. Ryan is a kind child. What's wrong with that? Kind sounds nice, but it basically means he has no opinions, right? I worry about what will become of such a child in the future. Jessica's words were projecting her own frustrations onto her nephew. She had been unrecognized by her mother and constantly compared to her sister for years. That resentment was now directed at her sister's son. At 6 p.m., Emily finally collapsed to her knees in the kitchen. The pain was so intense that she could no longer stand. Ryan rushed over in panic. "Mommy, does your tummy hurt?" "I'm okay, sweetie." Emily desperately tried to smile so as not to worry her son. However, that smile was distorted by tears. The anxiety of her husband's absence, the lack of understanding from her family, and above all, the sense of responsibility for her unborn child were crushing her. "Mommy, should I call Daddy?" Emily was surprised by her 3-year-old son's suggestion. Ryan had learned how to use video calling with his father. However, she felt sorry about calling her husband back in the middle of an important project. "I'm still okay, sweetie. Daddy is doing important work." Margaret and Jessica remained unmoved by Emily's pain. For them, tonight's dinner party was a long-time social occasion that should take priority over Emily's condition. "Finish setting the table before your aunt and cousin arrive." Emily tried to stand up at Margaret's command. However, she couldn't put strength in her legs. Ryan took his mother's hand and tried to support her with his small body. "Mommy, I'll help you." In that moment, Emily was moved by her son's love. While her blood relatives didn't understand her, this small life was definitely loving her and trying to support her. That was the only ray of hope for her now. However, the pain continued to attack mercilessly. Warm liquid flowed at her feet as she knelt on the kitchen floor. She had reached her limit. Enduring any longer would be dangerous for the baby too. "Mom, my water broke. I have to go to the hospital." Emily's scream echoed throughout the house. However, Margaret didn't even try to hide her irritation while taking meat out of the oven. Aunt Marion and the others would arrive in just 30 minutes. The table setting was only half finished. What terrible timing! Why today of all days? Margaret's anger was directed not at her daughter's condition, but at the fact that the success of the dinner party was being threatened. She had maintained a certain status in the local social circle. Aunt Marion had always been strict, and if there was even the slightest flaw in preparation, it would mean embarrassment throughout the neighborhood. Emily staggered to her feet and tried to head toward the front door. She intended to get the car keys and drive herself to the hospital. However, Margaret stood in her way. "The hospital? You need to cook dinner instead. What will I tell the relatives?" Margaret's voice was cold and emotionless, as if her daughter's life was less important than social appearances. Emily stared at her mother in disbelief. "Mom, the baby is about to be born. You're always so dramatic. When I was in labor, I moved around normally. Besides, it's not your first child, so babies don't come that quickly." Margaret's nursing knowledge had become a weapon to torment her daughter. Statistically, it was true that second births were shorter than first births, but individual differences were significant. However, she absolutized her own experience and knowledge, dismissing her daughter's pleas. At that moment, Jessica came down the stairs. Seeing her sister's pain, something snapped inside her. The jealousy and feelings of inferiority that had accumulated over the years erupted as madness. "So big sister's perfect baby is about to be born." Jessica began to laugh. It was a self-deprecating laugh tinged with madness. In her eyes swirled years of dissatisfaction and despair. What kind of genius child will it be this time? Like Ryan, a perfect child loved by everyone? Or a beautiful girl doted on by mom? Emily felt fear at her sister's abnormal behavior. Jessica's face was distorted, making her look like a different person. Suddenly, Jessica headed from the front door toward the garage. There sat the white SUV that Michael had purchased for Emily. It was a family car chosen for safety, with a child's seat installed in the back seat. "You don't need this car, do you? You won't be able to use it much longer anyway." Jessica picked up a gasoline can hanging on the wall. It was something Margaret kept for the lawn mower. She began pouring its contents over the car. "Jessica, what are you doing?" Emily screamed while enduring her pain, but Jessica didn't stop. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were possessed. "What's the point of having another failure? They'll just turn out like me anyway, won't they?" While cursing herself, Jessica took out a lighter. In that moment, Emily's heart froze. "Stop. Please." However, Jessica threw the lighter at the car. Flames spread instantly, and the white SUV was engulfed in fire. Black smoke rose, and the explosive sound that echoed through the neighborhood shook the quiet residential area. "There, now the perfect family's perfect car is finished too. Just like my life, everything should burn and turn to ash." Jessica continued laughing maniacally. 28 years of pent-up emotions had manifested as destructive behavior. Emily stood frozen with fear and pain. Watching the car burn, she felt despair at losing her means of getting to the hospital. The baby in her womb was in danger, and there was nothing she could do. At that moment, a small hand gripped hers tightly. It was 3-year-old Ryan. The light from the flames illuminated his face, and in his eyes was not fear, but strong determination. "Mommy, it's okay. I'll protect you." Ryan's voice wasn't trembling. He had a composure like an adult. He hadn't forgotten the words his father had said before leaving on his business trip. "When Daddy's not here, can you be the man who protects Mommy?" "Yes. I'll protect Mommy." That promise was about to be fulfilled. "I'm going to Mrs. Johnson's house, so it's okay." Ryan looked at his mother once, then ran toward the neighboring house. His small figure running desperately on little legs lit a ray of hope in Emily's heart. Margaret and Jessica were momentarily stunned by the 3-year-old's actions. Against the backdrop of the blazing car flames, a small shadow was running toward the neighboring house. That scene seemed to confront them with something. What is that child planning to do? Margaret felt anxiety for the first time. However, it wasn't concern for her grandson, but fear that the commotion would spread throughout the neighborhood. Jessica stared at the flames and was suddenly brought back to reality. She finally understood the gravity of what she had done. But it was too late to take it back. Emily endured her pain while watching her son's actions. This small life was her only hope now. Her blood relatives had abandoned her, but her son was different. The flames rose high, and neighbors began appearing at their windows. The quiet residential area suddenly became chaotic. However, Emily's heart was strangely calm. Her son had taken action. Everything would surely be all right. Ryan's small back stopped in front of the neighboring house's door. He began desperately knocking on the door. For his mother's sake, the 3-year-old boy had stood up. In that moment, Emily was moved by her son's strength and love. This child would surely grow up to be a fine man. And she realized anew that family isn't just about blood relations, but about relationships bound by caring for one another. Ryan desperately knocked on the neighbor's door with his small fists. His 3-year-old hands couldn't make much noise, and at first no one noticed. But he didn't give up. "Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson." His small voice gradually grew louder, and finally Mrs. Johnson opened the door. She had just returned from gardening and was wearing work gloves. She had noticed the black smoke rising from next door but hadn't thought it was an emergency. "Ryan? What's wrong?" "Mommy's having the baby. Help. The car is on fire." Hearing Ryan's urgent voice and seeing the flames blazing behind him, Mrs. Johnson instantly understood the situation. Having lived in the neighborhood for many years, she had vaguely sensed the complex circumstances of the Montgomery family. "I understand, sweetie. I'll call for help right away." Mrs. Johnson immediately called 911. "I need an ambulance, please. A pregnant woman is in labor, and there's also a fire." Her voice was calm but accurately conveyed the urgency. Meanwhile, Ryan returned home and picked up the tablet from the living room. His father had taught him how to use video calling before his business trip. With small fingers struggling with the unfamiliar operation, he tapped his father's icon. "Daddy. Mommy's in trouble." Michael's surprised face appeared on the screen. He had been in the middle of preparing for an important presentation at his hotel in Seattle. His son's urgent voice drained the color from his face. "Ryan, what's wrong? Where's Mommy?" "Mommy's tummy hurts, and the car is on fire. Grandma was mean to Mommy, and Aunt Jessica burned the car." Through the tablet, Michael saw the burning car and his wife's face contorted with pain. On the screen, Emily was sitting on the kitchen floor, enduring her pain. "Emily. Get an ambulance right now." Michael shouted to his subordinates in the conference room. "Cancel the presentation. Get an ambulance and fire department to my house immediately." Family came before the important project. Michael didn't hesitate for a moment to abandon the project he had spent 3 years preparing. "Ryan, you did great. Daddy will be home soon, so keep protecting Mommy." "Yes. I'll protect Mommy." Ryan's earnest response brought tears to Michael's eyes. He remembered the promise he had made with his son before the business trip. "When Daddy's not here, can you be the man who protects Mommy?" "Yes. I'll protect Mommy." What had been a casual father-son conversation was now being fulfilled. His 3-year-old son was acting with far more responsibility than the adults. The sound of sirens approached. Ambulances and fire trucks arrived simultaneously, and the quiet residential area suddenly became chaotic. The paramedics rushed to Emily and immediately began treatment. Professional conversations flew back and forth, and Emily was loaded onto a stretcher. Mrs. Johnson held Ryan's hand and rode with them in the ambulance. "I'll watch this child." The fire department began extinguishing the burning car. Fortunately, the fire didn't spread to other buildings, but the car was completely burned out. Police also arrived and began questioning Jessica as a suspect in the arson. "Why did you set fire to the car?" Jessica stood there dazed. As reality crashed down on her rapidly, she finally understood the gravity of her actions. The destructive behavior caused by her jealousy toward her sister could never be undone. Margaret also had to answer police questions. "Why didn't you take your daughter in labor to the hospital?" She was at a loss for how to answer that question. How could she explain that a dinner party with relatives had taken priority? Meanwhile, Michael was arranging a private jet in Seattle. Abandoning the company's important project might have a major impact on his career. But he had no hesitation. From the plane, he contacted his lawyer. Prepare to sue my mother-in-law and sister-in-law for abuse of a pregnant woman and arson. And stop all financial support immediately. Since her husband's death, Margaret had been living on assistance from Michael. Mortgage payments and daily living expenses all depended on that aid. If that support stopped, their lives would collapse. The assistance to my mother-in-law was based on the premise that Emily and the children's safety would be guaranteed. Since that premise has collapsed, there's no reason to continue. Michael's voice was calm but filled with anger. The price for endangering his wife, son, and unborn child was heavy. At the hospital, Emily safely gave birth to a baby girl. A healthy 6-pound baby. Ryan gazed at his sister through the nursery window, his eyes shining. "Mommy, little sister is so small. She's very cute, isn't she? I became a big brother." Late at night, Michael arrived at the hospital. Though his face showed exhaustion, when he confirmed his family's safety, relief spread across his features. Ryan jumped into his father's arms when he saw him. "Daddy. I protected Mommy." Michael hugged his son while tears flowed. "You did great. You're a real man." He felt pride as a father in the courage and sense of responsibility his 3-year-old son had shown. When the blood-related adults had failed, a small child had saved the family. The next morning, Margaret and Jessica appeared at the hospital. However, Michael refused their visit. "Your assistance ends today. The crime of endangering Emily and the children is serious. I'm also applying for a restraining order." Margaret turned pale. Without the assistance, she couldn't pay the mortgage or living expenses. Jessica would also likely be prosecuted for arson. "Please, let's talk about this." However, Michael's resolve was firm. He no longer intended to show mercy to those who threatened his family's safety. The hospital the next morning was quiet, as if the previous night's commotion had been a lie. Emily held her daughter in the nursery with a peaceful expression. Michael and Ryan sat beside her, and for the first time, the small family felt complete tranquility. At 10 in the morning, there was a knock on the hospital room door. Margaret and Jessica appeared. Both had been crying all night, their eyes red and swollen. Jessica especially had been regretting her mad behavior from the night before and blaming herself continuously. "Emily, please, listen to us." Margaret's voice was trembling. However, Michael stood up and blocked their way. "Visits are declined. I've already consulted with lawyers about yesterday's incident. Michael, we know we were wrong. But aren't we family?" Jessica fell to her knees and bowed deeply in apology. "Please, forgive us. We were wrong. I didn't mean to hurt my sister." Margaret also knelt and pleaded through tears. "Don't stop the assistance. If we lose this house, we'll be on the streets. Please, give us one more chance. I went crazy with jealousy of my sister. But seeing that child's courage opened my eyes. 3-year-old Ryan was trying to protect his family while I was trying to destroy it." Jessica's tears were genuine. However, Emily quietly shook her head. "Mom, I've reached my limit. A mother who chose social appearances with relatives over her daughter's suffering in labor, I can no longer think of you as my mother. Jessica, when you set fire to that car, you endangered not only the baby in my womb but Ryan too." Emily's voice was quiet but filled with firm resolve. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about relationships where people care for each other and support each other in times of trouble. "Last night, I learned what a real family is." Michael squeezed his wife's hand. "I prioritize Emily and the children's safety. I'll proceed with the restraining order as planned. The assistance is also stopped. But the mortgage." Margaret's voice was desperate. That's your problem. Take responsibility for endangering my wife and children. A week later, Michael decided to relocate his family to Portland, Oregon. Though he had caused losses to the company, his boss understood his decision to prioritize family and approved his transfer to the Portland branch. The new house was in a tree-lined residential area with a large oak tree in the backyard. Ryan grew into a kind big brother who took good care of his sister Sophia and played well with neighborhood children. Emily resumed her graphic design work from home and found hope in life in the new place. Having overcome difficulties together, the couple was bound by an even deeper bond. Meanwhile, in California, Margaret and Jessica began new lives in a small apartment. Margaret lost her house, and Jessica's arson record became a major obstacle in job hunting. However, Jessica seriously faced her life for the first time and was trying to recover while receiving counseling. Once a month, photos of the grandchildren arrived from Emily. Seeing growing Ryan and adorable Sophia, Margaret painfully realized what she had lost. But she would never be allowed to see them again. One evening in their new Portland home, 5-year-old Ryan was gently speaking to his 2-year-old sister. "Listen, Sophia. Family members protect each other. That's what Daddy taught me. Since I'm your big brother, I'll protect you." Watching this scene, Emily smiled from her heart. Even with blood relations, without love, you're not family. True family consists of people who care for and support each other. The setting sun illuminated the oak tree, and warm light enveloped the family. Here was certain love and bonds. This was the true form of family.